Part 2. Aurora. In the darkness I found the light, reminding me of my true sight. For just one word there was a range, for the sparks that were obtained. The yellows, the whites, the roulettes, the reds, covering my room like angelic threads. Too long had I been hiding in the dark, I had nearly lost my spark. But somehow I was feeling each of the sun's rays that were falling on me today, and realizing that it didn't bite, I looked around for more light. Lizzie and Enwin, from the factory. I wandered back to the monitor room, which had become my new home. The years I no longer had ringing with everything that had happened, and to be honest, more than a little from the mysterious technology I was using to communicate with. After several thousand days, perhaps even weeks, not to mention billions of years of peace between our subcontinents and the 14 houses of the Clandusprod dynasty, suddenly there was a new threat from these humans, and it was a very real, scary and powerful threat. Something I felt so strongly in the bones that I didn't have either. You really must find some new analogies, Lizzie, I told myself crossly. And yet it was a threat that I knew was false, based purely on the only human I knew. I instinctively felt that they didn't want this war either. I was in the unique position of being perhaps the only one of my kind who could really see what was going on, of having some insight into the enemy, and yet no one listened to me when I was alive. They certainly weren't going to take any notice of me dead. There was nothing I could do to warn my people who had no doubt rewritten me out of history anyway by now, my name and face erased to all the Clandusprods of my own clan who were to come after me. Even stuck in a timeless universe, I could see how the future would most likely play out for both our planets, an inevitability that neither side wanted but were powerless to prevent. I dreaded to imagine all the suffering that might be caused on both our planets, yet at the same time I knew, better than maybe any Clandusprod who had ever lived, that death wasn't the end they thought it was. It was quite a riddle of dilemmas I had found myself caught up in, and even thinking about them made my non-existent head ache. I returned to the dispersal room often, looking at my people as they rushed around looking busy with mixed feelings, all of them completely unaware both that I was up here looking down at them, or that billions of new eyes were now studying them intently and working out how to wipe them out. I felt as if I was saying goodbye to my race, the only witness to their extinction, too sad and distracted to be amongst them as a ghost again just yet. We had been to our nearest planets, of course, but more out of a courtesy to the idea of exploration than any great need to colonise or wave a friendly tentacle to any neighbours. Inner space was our thing, not outer space. The whole expedition to a badly formed rock had been of such little interest back home, no one had ever bothered again. I kept watching them, willing them for a sign of recognition, or for someone to suddenly pick up a telescope and point it in Earth's direction, but no one ever did. I think, really, deep down, I just wanted them to look back at me, or for at least one of them to miss me. But after that first time when I had been a spirit, nobody ever seemed to. On my own planet, it was as if I had never existed. Only on this mysterious and alien, most likely hostile world did I mean anything to anyone. But oh, I realised in a sudden flash of insight, Enwin suddenly meant more to me than any of them, and I was more worried about the very real risk of him being blown up in retaliation if my people got an idea of what was going on, than I was about my own kind. Though our weaponry was dusty and quite possibly rusty, they could slot it back together again in a hurry, I felt, if my people ever discovered what was going on. But would they ever find out? And was there a way that I could tell them? My thoughts turned back to Enwin, and how much easier it would be if we were both on the same planet, saying the same things, but alas, that could never be. Was that enough for a relationship, though? Could we sustain a true relationship with nothing more than two voices? And instead of introducing him to my clan for submission as a familial extension, as is tradition, I would have no other eyes to greet him with. I wondered what my clan's reaction would be to all of this. In the eyes of my homeworld, would I be seen as a traitor, fraternising with the enemy, even though we both desperately wanted peace. Would any of them understand that the rigid rules that had shaped our planet no longer applied up here, as I'd always told them they shouldn't? But of course we were not on the same planet, or even in the same dimension. Geographically, Enwin was living his life at a much slower rate to my people than he was to me, however many light years distance that was. Where even was I truly? Now that the shock of my death had worn off slightly, and this place, wherever it was, seemed most likely home for the foreseeable future, I began to wonder about it more. Was it up in the sky, as Enwin had asked me? Was it outside the boundaries of space and time? Was it anywhere that came with its own postcode? I realised how little I seemed to know about anything anymore, and with time to kill before Enwin woke, and a timeless universe to spend it in, I decided to look around my new home properly, for the first time. What were in these other doors beside mine? Not much. A few familiar-looking bits of technology that looked like the teleportals I had been using, with the same odd stuck-together technology of what I recognised to be Clandusprod, organic and elaborate, parts that I now recognise as being pure human, metallic and streamlined, and other bits that I didn't recognise at all, triangular and fragile-looking, covered in strange symbols I couldn't read. There is one door I instantly sense I shouldn't open, one set apart from the others. I do, however, distantly hear voices talking. I can't hear many words, but Ziggur is free, and Earth, and Danger are definitely three of them. Together with the strange technology that has turned up in our room, technology which I notice is in none of the other rooms, it makes me a very apprehensive Clandusprod. To my frustration, though, the conversation seems to be over. I dart back to my room with a lingering sense that I shouldn't have heard what I just heard. But what does it all mean? Is the Earth really planning to blow my planet up? Are these voices trying to stop it? Or is this inevitable, and they want this to happen? I look out for the nicer of the voices that spoke to me when I first arrived, but there is no sign of them anywhere. For all I know, they are behind the door I desperately don't want to open. I decide there's nothing more I can sensibly do, and go to ask Enwin what he thinks, counting down the time till I can ask him, staring once again at the changing light source, and wondering whether humans have these strange new colours too. Only I don't get too far at first, as we lose contact almost as soon as I enter his head. What happened there, I ask, and why are you sitting in the dark? Did you lose your only son? Sorry, said Enwin. The electricity's out again, and it seems to have sent our connection haywire. It must be some side effect, the static in the air affecting the way we talk. Weird. Well, I hope it doesn't go again. Oh, it will. That's 4 times this week alone. Just keep trying if for some reason you get cut off and you can't get through, Lizzie. Now what was it you were trying to ask me? Labels list our contents, but can still hide the truth away. Strangers in the street may yet be the ones we're meant to meet, but is it truth or illusions? Either way. How many of us failed our potential because of what we were searching for? A partnership, a collaboration ought to be a celebration, but was it not that after all? All I know is that she's so rich, she cries champagne tears, but has no one left to cry them for. Truths and illusions. The Camalosian hymn. Enwin's response to my question is thoughtful. He asked me about the wires, but I know almost nothing of technology, not like these humans who seem to be born with an electric socket under each arm, and where harnessing their planet's natural resources seems second nature. Well, I guess the only thing to do is to wait for someone who does know what's going on, says Enwin. Unhappily, I agree. Suddenly, though, a thought occurs to me. Hey, I wonder if this teleportal works just as well the other way around. It was a simple enough statement to say, but one that led to so many complicated repercussions. We spent the rest of the afternoon trying to do just that. It was less natural this way round, as if the technology wasn't designed to work that way. Eventually, though, it worked, of a sort. I felt an odd feeling in my brain, as if my thoughts were being pushed gently to one side, and another presence was in my head. "Enwyn?" I asked, even though it was obvious who it was. "Lizzie, I feel you. I feel all of you. So many thoughts whizzing around. How do you make sense of them all?" "How do you make sense of yours?" I ask him, even though I know full well that the technology is rather biased in my favour, designed to filter his thoughts out. "This is weird. So much light. It's burning my eyes." We quickly stop there before anyone passes out, and I panic that I have mortally wounded him, or at least set his illness back in some irreparable way. To a human used to a planet with one sun, the light must have indeed seemed horrifically strong. I wonder how any humans who end up here cope with the intensity of it, before wondering if indeed any at all had ever made it here. Enwyn is wiped out after that, and admits that while he didn't get a good look, he didn't recognise the wires coming out of the teleportal as human technology, a sentence that takes an age for him to get out to me properly, so fatigued is he. I get worried he is going to get even sicker, but even while I'm panicking, and inside Enwyn's head sensing his pain and frustration, I remember that going slowly is probably better than going fast, and get him to slow down, to breathe, to rethink his way back into his room where there is no light. Eventually, slowly, the whimpering stops, and the part of his mind that is mine slowly returns to normal. I mentally ruffle his hair slowly, willing him to come round, to engage with me again. I worry again that I might have lost him, that I am in trouble once more, that I will always be in trouble, that the only person who ever truly meant anything to me is dead, and it is all my fault, and Enwyn is going to attack me, before wiping the thought away clean like a slate, because I don't want to trouble Enwyn any more than he is already, before flushing in embarrassment that I shouldn't be thinking about my feelings now anyway. Slowly, very, very slowly, I feel him reach out with his arms, and I get the sudden fleeting worry that he is about to attack me. Instead, I feel his arms mentally, slowly groping their way round me to give me the biggest hug I have ever had in the universe. "Not your fault. Would never hurt you, ever." I throw my arms around him in a flow of grateful tears, so glad that he is still alive, that he isn't cross with me, that he still loves me. That last thought comes as a shock, only slightly edging out the other shock, which is that Clandusprods seem to cry differently to humans. I realise with surprise that his tears are water, like so much of his planet, not the tears we Clandusprods have, which double as a rather nice and intoxicating drink designed by evolution to help you forget about all your troubles much quicker, and start on this thought before thinking better of it and leaving it for another time. I sigh. I ought to leave. Enwyn is too exhausted, and I have been in his head far too long already. But there is so much to tell him, and no place I would rather be. Instead, we stay like that for what seems like an eternity, even in a timeless universe, hugging each other tight and sending wave upon wave of love into each other's minds. "I love you," comes bursting out of the darkness like a firework in my head. "I love you too," I send back to him, making sure that each of the fireworks in my mind's eye wraps itself around one of his own, over and over again, until our minds are filled with these endless colours dancing across our brains. Slowly these are replaced by strange eating things and what looks like a bush. Odd, I think. Enwyn clearly needs more of a rest than I thought. Finally, after our brains have been filled for as long as we can bear, I feel a slight tug apart and release his mind slightly from this pure intensity. "Let's never do that again," I gasp. The reverse telepathy, I mean. The fireworks were lovely. "You saw them too?" he asked, pleased. Did you see or hear anything else?" Before I have time to reply, a bunch of flowers and a box of chocolates appear in my mind. I am, for what seems like the 50th time that day, briefly flabbergasted, which again is not easy for a Clandusprod who has never come across that word or its meaning before, using the teleportal, but who likes it and for whom it seems to fit. I add, puzzled. "I thought I did, but what is it?" "Oh," Enwyn says, his turn to be puzzled. "A traditional Earth custom on a, date." Oh, I add, how nice. I don't quite understand how something that grows naturally in the wilds and regular sustenance that belonged to a whole clan could ever be given to someone, never mind on a date. I have a sudden irrational impulse out of nowhere that maybe he thinks I am fat. I decide to send him some Clandusprod dating techniques of my own. I sent Enwyn's puzzlement at being given a love rock inscribed with the date we met and the extra spot I have mentally carefully woven into a part of his imaginary skin to tell all other Clandusprods he has taken. Oh, he adds, how, lovely. I laugh at his obvious confusion, like it's the punchline to a joke we have both been playing on each other to release the tension. We really need to get our planetary customs worked out before we go any further. I really appreciate the gesture though. Thank you. You're welcome. Yours too. How are you feeling now? You gave me quite a scare there. Never better, though I quite scared myself for a minute there too. Thank you for calming me round, Lizzie. What was it you saw? I'm curious. Not much that was definite through the lights. I caught the outline of a room though, and you as another body of light sitting on what, if I didn't know any better, I'd say was one of my chairs, and you with 2 pairs of slippers drinking a mug of hot chocolate, but I must have been delirious. What got me most were the colours and the light though. They were amazing. Like a giant Aurora borealis. Yes, they are, aren't they? All the greens, blues, rouleaus, shrubs and purples. Wait, he said. I saw green, blue and purple, but also red and yellow and orange. But what are rouleaus and shrubs? Well, the colours I saw, silly. And what is red and yellow and orange? Has the translator stopped working? I don't think so. This is fascinating. I think we might have different ranges of vision to each other. How do you mean? On my planet there are lights like gamma rays and X-rays that human eyes aren't able to see. Well, how do you know that they're there if you can't see them? We can sense them using machines without being able to see them ourselves. Oh, of course. Very human. I wonder if that's what happened to us, whether we're at different ends of the same spectrum. Let me try something. Do you see anything? Not a thing. I was thinking of the colour red just then. Try and think of one of your colours now. I choose a lovely shade of rouleau. Nothing. Gosh, how strange. But your world is full of rouleaus. Is it? Yes. It looks quite beautiful, or at least it did on your television screen earlier, and when you were out walking. One other thing. What's an Aurora borealis? Oh, is that another Earth thing? It happens near the 2 poles of our planet. Lots of colour. Like this. I get the sensation in my brain of lots of colours dancing in the sky. It is indeed very beautiful, but I have a surprise in store. Try an Aurora borealis mindercast, I say, and send the image into his head. Lizzie, that's so amazing. So very pretty. Our planet's poles aren't set. They're always shifting. Maybe because we have 3 suns to tug them around. So instead, 3 times a day we get this, and it lasts for hours. I used to help take the elderly residents to the windows to look at them. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite so beautiful. Except perhaps for you. I blush again, a lovely shade of rouleau, which I am thankful Enwyn can't see. This is so fascinating. We spend the rest of the afternoon staring at different objects in Enwyn's room and on his TV, trying to spot where our differences lay and trying to imagine what each other's worlds must look like to the other person. As exciting as that discovery was, though, it was only the second biggest one we had that day. Eventually, our need to explore colours wore out, and the thought that had been on my mind, and evidently Enwyn's too, came to the forefront instead. Lizzie, I am afraid I am getting sleepy again, but before you go, when you come back tonight, do you think we could maybe, the word date flashes up in my mind just as his words run out and he gets flustered. Yes, that would be lovely. Where would you like to go? I think I know just the place, he says. See you tonight. Oh, what will I wear? Maybe I can imagine something good. Come as you are, Enwyn said with a grin, except maybe wearing even less. But I'm not wearing much. I know. I loved you more than you ever knew, more than you ever allowed me to. Where every fault you felt I saw a plus, and really believed in the two of us. Though so far apart, I never felt closer to you, my oh so very human alien roller coaster. We never believed we could love so hard, which is what kept taking us both off guard. I feel your sorrow, your hidden tears. I plan to wipe them all away across the years, to search out all the wounds and help them heal. Remind you that nothing but our love was real. Your every high was worth every low. I am so sorry we had to go. Our paths didn't cross as long as I had wished, but I remember every moment, every hug, every passionate kiss. I remember them until I die, and we are reborn across the sky. Though not all things are meant to be, I'll always treasure the time that you were with me. Enwyn. Excitedly I prepare for the night ahead, which is the first date I've been on since being poorly, and it doesn't take long. I have no real food, and even less accoutrements to add to them, so it is just as well that my date isn't actually able to eat anything. I also have no decent clothes, since I have no reason to leave the house beyond my fortnightly trips to the job centre, although I do find a tie from the back of the cupboard somewhere. However, most excitingly, I also find a candle that I have forgotten all about, and pinch a tatty flower out of next door's hanging basket to put on the table. With that done, I return to the even more essential task of sleeping, to keep my energies going for the night. Eventually I am woken up from my slumber by the familiar voice I have been waiting for. I am not prepared at all for the vision in my head. Lizzie, you look stunning. And she does. Not because of, and indeed despite of the Clandusprod traditions that have made her place what looks like a broken flower pot on her head, a dustbin around her neck, and paint an extra series of green dots on her purple skin. I even get the scent of something vaguely repellent, like mouldy socks. No, it is because for the first time Lizzie is confident enough in the extra apparel that she's allowed me to see what she looks like for the first time in my mind's eye. And although I know no others to compare her to, she's a very beautiful Clandusprod, with the most gorgeous eyes I have ever seen, full of such soul and hidden quivering emotion. Enveloped in golden light, in my head Lizzie walks towards me and draws me in as if for a kiss. I made myself prettier just for you, she blushes. I take it you have the same identical customs for dressing up in your species. Close enough, I say, not wanting to ruin the moment. Not that you need them, you are gorgeous. From the top of your head to your tail? Is that a tail? Yes, do you still not have one? I thought you might attach one for special occasions, like this. No, is that a problem? Well, it helps the grip sometimes in the middle of, but no matter. I mentally put my arms around her and feel all four of her squeezing me back, one by one. It really is a most luxurious, comforting feeling, as if you are protected from anything and everything, to the point where I know hugs from two-limbed creatures are never going to be the same again. Good to know that even with all the differences there are in the universe, that hugs are universal, and somehow this thought makes sense in my head. Things didn't stop there though. In my idle thoughts I have often wondered about the act of kissing. It is, so they say, a scientific method of passing on your pheromones to another in the quickest possible way, which always made the whole thing seem scientific and logical. But the kiss that followed was anything but scientific. It came from somewhere primal as we darted for each other in perfect synchronicity, a human and a Clandusprod both aching for each other. I was a bit surprised when I realised she had a forked tongue, but that was hardly enough difference to spoil the moment when we were so close. Somehow, in the middle of that kiss, I felt all of the bright light I had seen in heaven earlier that day and more so, but this time it didn't hurt my eyes. On the contrary, it healed them and brought such comfort to my soul that I had ever known. Even though on the outside we would have looked a ridiculous pair to anyone looking in, as we stayed there in that moment nothing had ever felt more right. I felt one of her arms mentally tugging at the knot around my neck, so I undid it myself. Is it an Earth custom to put a noose around your neck when you want to, How odd. Yes, I suppose it is, I murmured between another kiss, as I let it slide to the floor, and for the first time to think to myself how odd it is. "Oh, a flower," says Lizzie, with such feeling and tenderness that I think at least I've got that right. "Tasty," she declares as she mentally pops it into her mouth and starts crunching, and somehow it doesn't matter, though I did have to stop at eating what remained of a candle and snuffed it out for later purposes, not that much of it was left. Mentally pushing me to the floor, we instinctively close our eyes, and I actually physically feel her warmth around me as we somehow find our way round each other's bodies, the love we have between us growing to the point where we can't keep it to ourselves anymore. "At last," she murmurs, "I have truly found my real heaven. And you know what? At last, so have I." One last surprise, I say, adding not just the clothes I had been wearing, but an extra layer on top. "There is something I want to show you." "Where are we going?" asks Lizzie as I make my way to the door. "You'll see," I say, and in my head I take her nearest hand in mine and lead her out with me through the door, round the corner past the job centre and television shop, which are showing replays of her planet in all its glory, as if it is watching over us. I lead her to our local park. Puffing my way to the nearest bench, I take her hand in mine and point to the sky. The sun is setting right at that moment, turning the clouds a gorgeous conglomeration of pink and purple, as the sun gives the sky a last goodnight kiss. "What is happening?" asks Lizzie in awe. "It's so beautiful." "The sun is setting for another night. I guess that as your planet has almost constant sunlight and you had no sunrise, you might never have seen one before." "You mean this part of your planet is on the distant side of the sun now?" "Yes, so there is nothing to light up the sky, except that," I say, mentally pointing out the moon to her. "What is that?" "Our satellite here on Earth. We call it the moon." "We don't have any of those on Ziggurat 3. "No, I guessed you wouldn't. The gravitational pull from 3 suns would have destroyed anything smaller than your planet." "Is it not another sun? It is glowing in the sky." "No, it is reflecting the sun. It is there in the sky in the daytime too, but the sun is so bright that you can't see it." "You humans are lucky, for as far as I know this is a unique phenomenon, at least in our side of the galaxy. No wonder your species became so great at technology too. What a pull that must have been to build something to explore the universe with. No wonder it is you who have found us before we found you, for all of our advanced age." "I love you to the moon and back," I blurt out. "Pardon?" "Oh," I say, blushing, "it's an Earth phrase. It's meant to mean, I love you very much." "That seems a bit restrictive. I mean, even humans must see that there is a whole universe beyond the solar system you live in." Then in a quieter voice, "I appreciate the gesture though. I love you to the Pleiades and back." "You too." We laugh at the ridiculousness of this. "I have been watching the news trying to work out where Ziggurat 3 is. And while I'm not very good at this and might be wrong, if you look out at that star to your right and squint a bit, I think you can just make out the faint pulse to the right of it. I believe that is Ziggurat 3, by the part we call Orion's Belt." "Orion's Belt? Who he?" "Oh, he's a famous hunter in Greek mythology. Do you see the arrow he's pulling back to shoot?" Lizzie tissed at this, in a disconcertingly human way, and I wondered if expressions of disagreement were also one of a few universal truths across the universe. "You humans, always so violent. To us, if you turn it round on its side, it's a Daedalus sitting down and wearing a hat." If you say so." "Anyway, you're right, it is home," says Lizzie in awe. "Thank you, this is just what I needed to see. This has been the perfect night." "The best night of my life," I say, as I mentally snuggle up to her. Without the sun in the sky, it is quickly going cold. "It is so strange to think that we have barely met. I didn't even know your planet existed a year or so ago my time, and yet here we are together, forever." She squeezes my hand. "So strange," I agree, "but somehow so right. It was as if I always felt you out there. I just didn't know you were quite so far out there. Back up here, no one can believe how quickly we have got along with each other. We thought we would be in denial at each other's existence. Neither of our species fully believes in alien beings, though I know mine have had their doubts, and talked about it. It makes perfect sense to me. All those stars up there with even more planets surrounding them, one of you had to have life on it. It is only the egocentric and the foolish that can look at a sky this full and think that they are unique, though so many of my species do. I agree, though so many of my clan wouldn't either. It is very lucky for me that you are one of the ones who believed, or I would be very lonely right now. Same here, Lizzie. I had never truly lived in my world. Oh, I existed in it, worked out how to cope with it, learnt the right ways of reacting to it, and how to make the most of my own self inside it, but I never truly lived in it. Maybe it was this that made me more open to the idea that there were different worlds out there, just waiting to be found. And more than that, that there was something else intangible and just out of reach out of all of us that I could never quite put my finger on. That's why I accepted you so readily, Lizzie, I thought spoke, after realising that my companion had been following my thoughts without me having to speak them. Because to me you make more sense than anyone or anything in my life ever has. And even if I can't have you in person, better to have you inside my head, to spend my full life with anyone else. And then I got another Clandusprod hug, which nearly broke the bench, before we sat there and counted the stars. Despite the first stirrings of fog, I swear the light from them grew brighter every second. After a while I realised that I was nodding off and being gently nudged awake, so after bidding goodbye to Zigguris 3, we made our way home, where Lizzie and I said our farewells. I am almost back in my room when one of the voices finds me. Lizzie, it says, as it stops me going into my room, and I am struck by an odd feeling of pride that I am considered important enough to be stopped by name. Or have these beings known my name all along, and they knew everyone passing through here? We have noticed that you've been missing for a long time, but hopefully means things are going well. I'm still not quite sure what I meant to be doing, but yes. Oh yes. To be honest, few things in my life have ever gone better. Not that this has ever happened often, but in the past we've noticed that some of the couples who work together are lonely living inside each other's heads. I can't say it had struck me to be lonely inside another's head after having spent so long being lonely inside my own, so I wasn't quite sure how to respond. Before I could, the voice continued again. Would it surprise you to learn that there are others of you out there? Others? You mean that there are other Lizzies and Enwins? Yes, but not even I know quite how many, or which planets we come from. It is the regular group meeting, where from here we can patch our minds together, so that you can all talk to each other. Unfortunately, it only works over a very limited distance, so they have to be beings who are relatively near both of you, in cosmic terms. I'm surprised by how happy this idea makes me. More Lizzies and Enwins to learn from, and more chances to get our message across, that the growing discovery of each other's planets is nothing to be feared. The voice had carried on talking when I hadn't been listening. Happens at midday human time. Do you think anyone would agree to? Yes, I add. If I have a chance to explain to him what is happening first, I'm sure he would, and I definitely would. Excellent. I hear you've caused quite a stir here already with how quickly we've adapted to each other's ways. I try to gulp in surprise, before remembering I have nothing left to gulp with. Yes, as others can sense you, just as you will begin to sense them after you've been doing this for a while. It just takes time and practice before you can do the same. You may have been listening in, I ask. Aha, so that was what the extra gadgetry in our teleportal room had been about. No, nothing like that. Just a murmur in the background, as if we were all using one big telephone station. We were all in different caves. On certain nights when the group meets up, they can boost the signal for a fixed time, so that you can all hear each other at once. It takes a while to learn not to talk over each other, but it is possible to learn. Some of the couples here have been talking together for years now. Sorry, days. I forgot about the Clandusprods discussing since the time. I hear your voices come over particularly strongly on your comes. You are a natural. I marvel at the idea that I can die and find my calling within the space of a few days, but this being me, not in the order it would be for anyone else. You are quite the special Clandusprod, you know. It is as if you were made for this, and I sense Enwins is quite a special human too. It generally takes longer than this to get any form of reaction from one you would call at all. It is as if you are spending your lives waiting for the other. I glow at this. I have never been praised for anything in my life before. So this is what being popular in class meant, and I realise now why so many of my peers sought it so hard. It felt good. I have found my calling. Oh yes, I remember, the voices can hear my thoughts. I must stop them running away with me. Yes, the voice laughs. I believe you have. Everyone does have a calling of their own after all. It's just that what was being born into a timeless universe that is all rather dependent on technology whether you find it or not. My Chernobyl natural born computer programmers who were alive at the time of the Renaissance, or the hair salons who were around during the Stone Age, or the medieval rappers, or the natural 21st century orangutans born too early, who felt in their times and had no skills at all. None of these things meant anything to me, what with being a Clandusprod from a world that had eschewed technology after blaming it for our Great War, but I got the gist all the same, and I was pleased about it. Then it is said, after the requisite amount of rest, I shall patch you in. Just to add to my delight, one of the balls of light turned up at my door to ask me if I was doing okay, and if I needed anything. Praise, and now offers of help. I'd never been praised before, and somehow it felt all the more special for coming from up here. Maybe I really was an important Clandusprod after all, and not just the nobody I'd long assumed I was. I was all ready to say no to the second question before I stopped myself and asked, "Do you happen to have a library?" I wanted to know everything there was to know about Enwyn's planet, partly so I didn't keep stopping to ask him ridiculous questions, and partly because I was determined that from here on in nothing was going to keep me apart from Enwyn, that I was going to be by his side, or at least in his mind, until he died. After all, you don't go on holiday without researching, do you, even if it's just to the next cave? So why not research the planet I wanted to grow old on? I was also, if I was being honest, intrigued by what a heavenly book sorting system would look like after struggling so long with the one at home. To my delight, the ball of light took me into the corridor, where he rearranged the corridors to bring the library closer to my room. So much knowledge, so very many books, so very much to learn, and a timeless universe to learn it in, yes. This was better than moping after my own people and getting angry that they didn't seem to notice I'd gone. Excitedly I go back to my room and only just stop myself running back to tell Enwyn. As I lay there on the mock-up version of my bed, I watched the dancing light positively glow as it rolled around my room. I wondered what these mysterious new couples would make of me and Enwyn, and thought for the first time how we might look to other people, something that had never even occurred to me before. Would we seem strange to them? We were completely the wrong species, age, height, build. Would the colours of our skin clash? Somehow this hadn't seemed to matter when we were together in each other's heads, but I have always been self-conscious for a Clandusprod, and adding new people into the mix might prove dangerous. Or would they turn out just to be misfits like us? I eagerly set about learning everything I thought I would need. Earth culture, basic Earth history, Earth music, Earth animals, so very different and so very much more varied than our own species, which mostly consisted of pest argibraphs and daedalurs and a few insects. But oh, how troubling that so many of these creatures have been wiped out. What are these humans thinking? What struck me most were the differences on Enwyn's bigger planet compared to mine. Where Ziggurat 3 was made up of one giant landmass with a tiny bit of water, every country on Earth seemed to be different. Is that why they have such a destructive nature, I wondered, reading up on Earth history, most of which seemed to consist of colonisation, conquering and slavery, because they all used to live so far apart they grew up separately. I remembered our community clans, our halls of young Clandusprods before we all split off into groups around the planet, and the sad leaving day when it came to say goodbye to all my friends. I thought. In contrast, Earth history sounded just like school to me, the bigger people picking on the smaller ones and stealing their lunch money while annexing Poland. Thankfully, before I got too carried away, the time passed, and I felt the familiar tug in my mind from the teleportal that Enwyn would be awake by now, and who knew, maybe our new friends would be too.
Humans are born from love, but as we'll show, one is not always the way they form and grow. Clandusprods are bred for use, but is that really just an excuse? A Bella brat can't be bothered with that. They roam their world like a giant cat. A Eurasian art in life has a head start, but has to learn to work more from the heart. And the grunt likes to harumph, but works best when that's curbed to only twice a month. A Camelosian has a calling, but can lose it if with manners they're appalling. A Dewsbury giant is full of life, and spends their whole time avoiding strife. A Clandusprods is full of woe, but always knows exactly how their life should go. But a Mechion is bonny, sweet and gay, a perfect creature in every way.
Mechion nursery rhyme from the 74th century. As I had hoped, Enwin was as pleased as I was that we were finally to meet up with different voices, and his amazement that after being alone for so long he would now have multiple people to talk to. I don't think I had quite realised the extent of his worries, but I had just been a hallucination caused by his illness. I could sense his hope that hearing other people talk openly about their experiences would make it easier for him to accept his. And I sensed his worry that I had sensed that, and he reached a metaphorical arm out to me to tell me that if I was a hallucination, then it was the greatest he had ever had, but he never wanted to stop hallucinating. Plus you'll always be my favourite, he said teasingly. This is exciting, I say absent-mindedly, as I wait for Enwin's clock to tick away. This is exciting, I say absent-mindedly, as I glance at my watch. I wonder what it will feel like having that many people inside my head. What does it feel like now to have my voice inside your head? Oddly normal, as if we were speaking to each other openly, just that I can't actually see you or sense where you are. It's as if I've looked down to do something when I talk to you, so that I'm not looking at you, but you are still in the room with me. Before I could reply, we both heard the sound of distant voices all talking at once. It was like a sudden rush of adrenaline and ideas rising up inside us, body and mind, without it ever actually coming from ourselves. Every voice somehow felt different, and not just from tone, register or pitch, but something more, as if every voice contained its own separate character, were speaking to us through the weight of experience, following similar yet different journeys to our own. Hiya. Good morning.
You mean afternoon?
Good timeless universe time.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome, one and all.
Did our newbies make it?
Yes, tell us that you here.
You make quite an impact, you know. We could hear you so clearly, it's as if you've been part of the group for years.
And it's been so long since we had anybody new, we're giving up hope.
Shush, let them speak, shush.
Yes, do speak. Don't be frightened.
Hush, I say, laughing at how full my head suddenly was after being empty for so long. Let us get into urgent edgeways. Nice to meet you all. Lovely, isn't it, Enwin? But Enwin was in shock. My head is so full, he shouted.
Oh dear, that can happen sometimes,
whispered a voice quietly.
It's been so long since we had any newcomers, and your signal was so strong, we just sort of assumed.
Sorry.
I can hear you all fine. I just think it's a bit of a shock for Enwin, that's all. He'll be fine in a minute. Yes, I will be fine in a minute, Enwin adds in a voice that tells me he clearly won't be fine in a minute, or even several. Are you all Clandusprods and humans? Like us, I whisper. I'm a Clandusprod.
I'm a Habridad. Me too. I'm a Bella brat from Helisphere. I think we're in the next door part of the solar system to you. Ditto.
I'm a Camelosian, hitherto known as the first party of the first part. I'm a Camelosian also, hitherto known as the party of the second part.
I'm a Dewsbury giant.
I'm a Clandusprods. We lived on planets right next to each other for generations without knowing we ever existed, till I got here.
We had a massive debris field in the way.
I am a Eurasian art. So far there has been only one of me, and I feel very lonely, though it's given me much time to think deeply about things. I have been head wet to my Bella brat for a year now. That's been an experience. I am the only Mechion.
And I am the only McGrape.
This is so exciting. There are so many of you, I cry. It's been so long since I heard another Zigguratosian voice. I thought I would never hear one again. Me too. You are only the second of us to make it, in our little group anyway. We suspect there's more out there, but for some reason we've been kept apart.
Still not as many as Happy Dad's though. Yay, we're winning. Sorry, old man.
The voice adds as Edwin starts to wince again.
Is your human okay, do you think?
I quickly judge the state of Edwin's nerves. He will be, I add, but without much confidence. Nice to meet you all, Edwin stutters. Head's a bit full just now. I struggled too the first time. Some of us really take to it, and some don't. It's easier if you're the one in the headspace rather than the one in the body. Yes, tell me, are the ones talking from, well, the afterlife? Are you physically near me right now? Well.
That's just it, you see. We don't actually know. We tried to look each other up once. Back when there were just the four of us.
But we couldn't find each other. We were just balls of light, you see. I'm sure you already know how much light makes up the universe we're in, and for some reason the corridors up here keep moving. It was impossible to give each other directions. We're wandering around for days. It was as if something or someone wanted to keep us apart. We probably waited for some big fixed time event or something.
Oh. My face fell at this, or at least it would have done if I'd still had a face. As lovely as it is to be in Enwyn's head, I was hoping I could physically meet with at least some of you.
We all felt like that. I still do sometimes. I think it's harder for those of us who are up in the sky than it is for those of us in the soil. We've lost so much in getting here. We don't get to have an existence of our own.
Rubbish, adds another voice good-naturedly, in a debate that's clearly been going back and forth for some time before Enwyd and me had arrived.
It's much harder for those who are soil-bound. We have to carry on with our day-to-day lives without suspecting that we know there's a much bigger universe out there. You lot just have to talk.
Not to mention the fact that you can't really have any other relationships without letting on why you having to keep stopping to talk and explain yourself all the time. Well, you can, but it's not that straightforward to explain.
We have nothing but our voices though, nothing to distract us. That's really hard, especially when our significant bodied other is fast asleep and we have nothing to do.
That's been so tough for me too, I add, despite having only just realised this. Those times I go back to my room after leaving Enwyn are the worst. I feel so lonely, and it's absolutely definitely not his fault, but he sleeps a lot. Absolutely positively definitely not, chimes in Enwyn. I'd stay awake all the time if I could. It won't get easier once you find a routine. You two are so new to this though. No wonder your body bound is struggling a little. No, I'm fine, spits out Enwyn in staccato sentences, concentrating hard to keep his voice down.
We were amazed at how strongly you came through from the beginning. You two must have a really strong connection.
Yes, by the same stage in our head when the two of us hadn't even had a proper conversation yet.
Oddly, I feel myself blushing, despite not having any face to blush with. I was surprised myself. It's been the one good thing that's happened to me since I took my own life. There's an audible intake of breath from the rest of the group at this, and I have a feeling I used to have as a youngster when I'd said something that had upset someone else without comprehending why. In an instant, I am plunged from local hero to outcast. You mean I'm the only one that did? I just assumed.
Yes,
said the Hebridat kindly.
but we all died, you see, before our time, just not by choice. A mistake, they said. We still have things to accomplish, which is why we haven't been moved on yet. But we do things now with our soilers, our soil-born.
In essence, everybody has a ghost guiding them and holding their hand that we never truly see or speak to. But if we had a really important job and die before we have the chance to complete it, then we are given a more hands-on opportunity to do it.
We would all have loved to have lived a little longer, to accomplish what we needed to have done without ending up here. That's why we're a bit surprised.
It must have been really hard for you. Back on your planet, I mean. That's not an easy decision to make.
No, I add, it wasn't. Though I suppose, in a way it was. It seemed like my only option at the time.
None of us can help what happened in our lives before. But there is always a second chance. We are all proof of that.
Enwin always knows just when I'm feeling uncomfortable, and in the ugly silence that follows, he mentally gently squeezes my hand, and as I'm squeezing him back, yells out, "Pleased to meet you! I am a human!" 15 voices plus Lizzie's all giggle at once. Something about this number feels as if it's not quite right, but I put it to the back of my mind to muse over later. "Do you meet up often?" Enwin asks. "Oh, you Solomons, always obsessed with time."
Don't be cruel, Skyhead. It's important to those of us who have to fit things around timetables and deadlines.
Yes, Enwin, we meet up at the same time if we can. We only have a set time before the booster patch is turned off from up here though, so if we get cut off and everyone suddenly disappears, this is what's happened. Did any of you humans see the discovery of Zigger is free on the news?
Yes, we did. Us too. They got the most so wrong. Nothing like what we feared at all.
You mean our planet? What does that mean?
We're not quite sure, but the response in Enwin's town didn't seem that positive.
We better hurry up and discover your planet too, and quick.
We've heard about humans. Beware. Us Camelonians, the species to which I have been bodily attached and incarcerated until at least the end of this paragraph, I know now to give a wide berth to the earth. Ha ha ha, that rhymed.
Yes, no offence. I'm sure you're lovely. As a whole species, though, I've heard since ending up here, the humans can be a bit much.
I hope Earth doesn't discover Mechion next,
said a voice who introduced himself as Oliver. Not all humans are like that, added Enwin, though some are, I admit, a bit weird. Especially most of the ones I'm related to, thinking about it.
We picked up some of your first satellite broadcasts on our planet last month. Bit weird. Some shouty guy sticking one of his puny arms out at a lot of people. We didn't think it was good enough to scream to our fellow Eurasianites for our universal broadcasting system, so we didn't.
Oh dear, groaned Enwin, who explained in an aside to me that one of the first satellite broadcasts had been Hitler at the Berlin Olympics in 1936, but even at the time people had wondered if this would come back to bite us.
We on the Grumpus have just discovered one of your satellite machines named Voyager, with an obsolete recording disc on the side which we scanned and turned digital. All the greeting messages went on a bit and got quite boring, though we really like the rock and roll. Could have done without being sent your naked pictures, mind. We don't take them unsolicited, and you're not the best looking of races, no offence, so we decided not to reply.
That wasn't quite the idea, said Enwin. It was in the name of biology, you know, discovery.
We scanned you with our danger probe and discovered at least 14,000 nuclear weapons. We assumed at first you were at war with a neighbouring species that we hadn't discovered yet. The weird thing is they were all pointed at each other, so if any of them had gone up it would have destroyed half your planet and made it uninhabitable for the rest. Are you all mad?
No, but some of our leaders are, muttered Enwin feebly.
And the things you're doing to your planet. Your technology is pretty close to ours already, but you're still so young as a species. I don't think you understand the costs of it. All those lost trees, all that poison in your atmosphere. The effects on your planet must be catastrophic even in your era. Never mind what will happen next if you carry on like that.
They are, said Enwin uncomfortably. Most sensible people would agree with you. Every generation or so everyone comes to the conclusion that they're not actually going to set the things off, and they vow to keep them to a minimum, but nobody gets rid of the weapons entirely, just in case. Though to be honest, if someone let one of the things off, there wouldn't be time to be retaliating or wishing we had one just in case. I don't understand why they keep being renewed, and nor do most people, but there's not a lot we can do if our world leaders don't agree. As for climate change, we're going to do something about that. Very soon, I hope.
Then vote your leaders out and get in someone who does know quick, while you still have a planet left. It's yours as much as theirs.
Don't think we haven't thought about it, said Enwin sheepishly. Earth just doesn't work that way.
Why not?
They have a weird political system on their planet, I said, coming to Enwin's aid. It's really not the main population's fault. They know all this. It's just that they are easily conned and the people in power have too much of it. Is it true that the Earth, hitherto known as the party of the first party, is still reliant on A, fossil fuels, B, country boundaries, C, the word of your leaders, and D, haven't spent your time finding new sources of power? They call you a fossil fuel planet in my world. Ha ha ha, big Camelosian joke. The McGrumph harumps at this.
The Earth needs to be a bit more like Ziggurat free, if you ask me. Now there's a proper society. No wars in 782 generations, isn't it now?
More, I say, but Clandusprods get a lot wrong too. I hate the confining nature of our society, the way you're labelled from beginning to end and kept apart from each other. At least the humans all intermingle in one big conglomeration without being divided into jobs or careers or political affiliations. My species just skulks about on different parts of the planet trying to avoid each other. They might have learnt the folly of their ways, shooting at each other, but that doesn't mean they get on either. It's more a quiet truce that few truly believe in. I think you are right to be scared, Lizzie, said my fellow Clandusprod. There's no knowing what humans might do.
Yes, they're primitive savages, only interested in themselves. No offence.
Surely every planet is flawed, Enwyn adds to rescue me. Isn't it?
Our planet Helisphere is great,
says Abella Black simply. There seems to be a lot of nodding going on.
Ours too.
You betcha. We're the best, ha ha ha.
There's no place like home, and certainly no place like our home.
Our society is perfect.
Everyone should live like Dewsbury giants.
Peace has reigned on our planet longer than anywhere else, and I'll fight anyone who says anything different.
There is no perfection like making on perfection.
A further voice giggles. I think Lizzie makes a fair point about our species, says the other Clandusprod. We have much to learn from our planet, and none are too old or civilised to keep growing. Ziggurat is probably older than any of your civilisations, and as such rather set in its ways. We have stayed constant where other species have risen and fallen, but is that enough to count as civilised? Exactly, says Lizzie. Maybe our species has just never done anything exciting enough to risk killing themselves, and maybe they should.
As half of the pair who have been here the longest, I have to ask you what I ask every newly head-wed couple. How do you two feel? Is it a problem for you fitting two minds into one body? Some have more problems than others.
No, it's made it easier, strangely. It always felt as if there was a vacuum in my head, and now it feels full at last, the way it was meant to be. Same here. The only time I struggled was when all of your voices were inside my head at once, but I've grown used to it now, said Enwyn. Can I ask something, though? We were always brought up on my planet to expect other beings to be alien and strange. Our very word alien has come to mean something weird and confusing, as much as it means extraterrestrial. But with Lizzie, aside from one or two fundamental differences, I'm always shocked at how many similarities we have. Is it the same for all of you too?
Oh, that. We were told that there are 10 universal similarities between planets, but we were never told exactly what the 10 were. So every time we hear of some connection between ourselves, that's what we put it down to. I think with me and my headweb we were up to 274 similarities in the end though, so I'm not sure it's a hard and fast rule. And they're not necessarily those that make sense. I mean, you would think that it would be a universal truth that the best people for the job would be in charge of that particular job, but they aren't. In any species, instead power is a means for the greedy to take control of things they don't understand, plunging their world into chaos and confusion over and over again. Who sanctions this, you might ask? Why, the people, every single time, because the people who are best suited for the job aren't the ones shouting the loudest, or appearing on TV, or putting themselves forward for promotion, or even giving the best interviews. When did life stop being about who fitted best and worked the hardest, and ended up being about who shouted the loudest and could bag themselves the biggest bonus?
Not with Clandusprods, I say nervously. Sadly, that's even true of Clandusprods, I think, even though we are meant to be chosen for our jobs. I always suspected that we were put in the jobs that kept us out of trouble, rather than the ones where we could shine the most. Ah, says Lizzie, as if a universal truth had long ago been tugging at her sleeve, but had long escaped her, had just run into full view to say hello. That explains everything.
Rumour has it that once we all get sent on from where we are now, that's what happens next. But the only difference between the planets we live on and heaven is that we get to be ourselves at last and do what we were meant to do in this life.
I've never understood that, says Enwyn. Why not allow us to be ourselves in the here and now? Why in all the many generations on our planet, and even more on all of yours by the sound of things, has nobody thought to try that?
Maybe that is the problem we were all put here to solve. Maybe we were just being reincarnated in heaven when we have solved it.
Your planet has a reincarnation theory too, spits out Lizzie, beating Enwin by a few milliseconds.
As far as we can make out, all planets do. The universe is big into recycling, of everything. No species lasts long enough to survive without it, and that surely will include humans. Why not souls too? Or why else will we be given so many things to learn in just one lifetime, and nothing to use our knowledge for?
Not to mention we get to hear every joke all over again as if they're brand new, haha. There wasn't much anyone could say to that, so instead the conversation moved on to which planet had what, and who had achieved some milestone at the earliest date. It was to all intents and purposes rather like an intergalactic version of the Earth game Top Trumps, seeing which civilization had the longest heritage, the greatest wisdom, the kindest treatment of the old and sick, and the best technology. Enwin's planet came last, of course, on every score except the technological vote, where Earth was third, but he seemed to take coming into last place in good grace. After being soundly beaten by the Bella brats of Helisphere every single time, with, so Enwin and I felt later on consultation, a modicum of friendly cheating going on, I thought to ask my new companions their stories of how they first made contact, perhaps desperate to emphasise the speed of mine and Enwin's connection as perhaps our biggest trump cards to play. To my surprise, it had taken a very long time for other beings to connect with each other at the speed we had, and we seemed to be more or less unique. I had an awful problem believing my habitat, said my fellow Clandusprod. I thought I had gone mad for a month straight and wouldn't listen to her at all.
I know how you feel,
said the McGrumph.
My camelosian called me a symptom of indigestion and wouldn't listen for a week. In turn, when I first met my Dewsbury giant, he assumed I was a side effect of some medicine he was taking, so I talked to him as if I was the medicine bottle. Funniest thing ever.
My Mechion appeared as if in a dream, so I treated him like one for the longest time.
I was glad the Hardits assumed that we were a coma dream when our Bellabrat first made contact. Yeep.
It seemed quite easy, Enwin confessed. It felt as if it was all meant to happen, so I just let it be. So what do you guys normally do during one of these meetings? Chat the way we have been doing? Yes, mostly, but we do sometimes play games too. They're great fun. We're in the middle of a long-standing game of charades right now, for instance. It's good practice for us cloud-bound ones to practice our mind skills with all you soldiers. How on earth do you play charades with people from another universe? Oh, it's incredibly difficult, but every so often we'll find a book or a film or an album that everybody recognises, because every planet has them, haha.
Plus charades is the only game we've discovered so far that every planet plays. Listen, I'll go first.
Is it a film?
Not in my universe, but it should have been.
You can't have that. Is it a book then?
Well, no, but that's only because nobody's actually written it down yet.
But you can't have that either.
The game dragged on, with much hilarity and mock fallings out. In a lull, I asked everyone something that had been worrying me about the direction their planets had taken, and the feelings of gloom that had seemed to descend over both my planet and Lizzie's. It was clear from the rest of our time chatting to the other cross-pollinated races out there that the universe had gone mad. I thought that it had just been my world, but no, the darkness had taken over my entire world and had gnawed away across the solar system. The school bullies were winning everywhere we looked. The people who had got to power through anger and avarice and greed. Everyone was being taught to be scared of their neighbour and to be outright hostile to those who lived across the street, feeling that all their problems were caused by strangers that they didn't know, even though to the strangers it was them who were being held responsible for everything wrong with the way the world was turning. It seemed to be everywhere, amongst species of all type. It was a case of the billionaires and millionaires asking the half-rich to blame the poor for their suffering or taking more from them. It was those from the south asking those who lived in the middle of the planet to turn in the north. It was those who lived here asking those who lived next door to turn on those from far away. It was a divisive policy that had led directly to this war, where everybody feared everybody else, and it was a war, no less, being fought across all the parts of the galaxy that I had so far come into contact with. Only up here, in our little circle, did we all know that wasn't true, and with planets suddenly discovering each other left, right and centre, it felt as if all that hatred and jealousy was about to spill over from domestic disputes to intergalactic ones. We had to get the word out that it wasn't like that at all, that it wasn't strangers but the leaders we were over familiar with from sound bites on TV and in the newspapers and on the speak shows that we should fear the most, as it was the very people we had allowed into our homes that were tearing us apart and setting one half against the other. It was as if a magic spell had been cast by all the greedy, racist elements of the world at once, and they were all hiding in plain sight. I wasn't sure whether to be comforted or not, but it seemed to be a little bit like that everywhere, but a lot more like that on Earth than anywhere else.
I know we've teased you a lot today, Edwin,
said one of the Maraesianards thoughtfully.
But you have an excuse. Your planet is new and still growing. I don't know what I can say for the rest of us. We should know better.
How long do humans live for, anyway?
Everyone seemed shocked by the answer. Most beings here seem to live several centuries, and most for a millennia.
That's nothing. How do you get anything done in your lifetime?
Maybe humans just have such a busy life that they learn a lot in a small period. Don't they say that being in the third dimension is all about what you've learned?
No wonder humans are the way they are. If I only lived for that short amount of time, I'd feel pretty violent too.
Maybe it's because you're still so young and still growing that your lives are so short.
It was now that the Clandusprods started looking at their watch and muttered something about needing to go. The Bellabrats laughed at this. It seemed a running joke that they were always the first to leave. Nevertheless, it was the cue for all the pairs to bid farewell to each other, until soon only me and Lizzie were left. As good fun as it had been to meet so many new beings, it was glorious to get the space inside our own heads back, in rather the same way I used to feel after hosting a very good party, when everyone had finally gone home and I could sink into an armchair. However, like a good party, the conversation also still felt as if it was rattling around our heads, and for the longest time it felt as if it hadn't all quite gone, as if we were both being overheard. Slowly, though, I began to talk with Lizzie as normal. That was fun. I had honestly never considered that there were more of us. Yes, I was worried it was going to be like a blind date, but with even less idea of what my companions looked like. It all seemed to go well, though, apart from the constant teasing about humans anyway. Are we really seen like that the whole universe over? Do other people really hate us and look down on us so much? It does look like it, though mine had no idea you even existed. I wouldn't worry though, Enwin. Your species is still fresh from the oven, with lots of room to grow. Why, you seem almost civilized to me. Not much trace of your monkey ancestors left. Thanks, I said, aware that I was being teased. You're doing pretty well yourself for a planet that hasn't even invented the electric toaster yet. The electric what? Come, I'll show you. I'm hungry after all that, I said, whisking Lizzie to the kitchen. How quaint, said Lizzie as the toast popped up, and almost tasty. Well, what is this wheat you're showing me? I felt the imagery of crops in your mind before, but never asked you what they were. We have no means of growing any with such sunlight. All our food is organically grown in food caves. A shame. This is so tasty. Now if I'd shown all those voices for toaster, humanity would have won that game easily, and we'd have even thrashed the Bellabrats. Oh, I don't think anyone would ever have been allowed to thrash the Bellabrats. Yes, I got that impression too. And we laughed. That was fun. I hope we get to do it every week. Sorry, year. It was. It rather felt like I'd taken you home to meet my family. Family who didn't seem to want me on the furniture. Luckily for me, pet Argibraphs seemed to be much like terrestrial dogs, so I didn't have to explain that reference as I sometimes did with my jokes. I am worried though about what my people will do to your planet. I know what they're like, the worst of them. Well, I guess there's not a lot we can do about it, is there? It was at that moment we both had the slightest sense that someone had indeed been listening in, and had then silently gone, shortly before Lizzie went too, and I fell into an unusually rested sleep.
Two faces light up the night sky, but two different versions of it do they see. One sees a light and legitimacy, the other doesn't and asks themselves why. What are astronomers and astrologers both, but visionaries who read our nights, scan our days and focus our sights to everything we have not? And if one studies logic and another their heart, until we both find patterns in things that we see, who's to say which is a better path to history? The two roles are not really so very far apart, but if one travels journeys by position of sky, and plots their life by the cluster of stars, who is to say that is not who we are? But man in his progress is not entitled to fly. I run by the stars, but also by noon, and when the horizon fades, my body lies still, to crush the freewheeling and hold on to the will. Control is not full control, and can never be soon, so two faces explore the light of the sun, conjoined by the same cause that leaves them bereft, realizing that heaven is just a false name for death, but is destined never to be undone.
Eurasian Art Lullaby. Lizzie, I know we can never be a normal couple doing the sort of things that normal couples do. I know we can't go out on full dates together, to kiss or hug or the other stuff, and I can't exactly take you round to meet the family I don't have. But maybe, just maybe, we can be there for each other, to come home to share our problems with, to metaphorically hold each other's hands through whatever life throws at us. Maybe in some small way we can call ourselves human boyfriend and Clandusprod girlfriend. No, that sounds stupid, Enwyn. You've really excelled yourself with pretentiousness this time. I was practising for the time when Lizzie was due to come. I didn't know that she'd arrived early and was listening in. No, that sounds rather lovely. And of course the answer's yes. I rather thought we were already. Oh, you heard? I wasn't expecting you just yet, you see. I rather forgot you could read minds and... Hush. That was perfect as it was. Not that I'm in the position of having much choice anyway, but even if there was, I still choose you, every time. Even if you could be with a fellow Clandusprod, like the other voice we heard. Maybe that's part of the draw. I'm not sure if I really would be saying this if you were. On Ziggurat 3 you are paired up with who you're meant to be best fit with. It's all decided long before your birth. Lizzie mentally pulled a face at this. Well, you can say no if you want to. It's frowned upon to marry someone from outside your clan or your family group. And all of mine were the ugliest Clandusprods you ever saw. I didn't like any of them. How can love be decided at birth? How can characteristics of the cave you were brought up in decide your fate? For chemistry in science terms surely cannot dictate chemistry in relationship terms. Love is never something that stands still, but evolves with each passing hour and conversation. It's maybe a bit early for philosophy just yet, before we've even hit breakfast. Lizzie giggled. Well, that's a better response than the last time I brought that up. I got detention for asking my sociology teacher why. Mind you, I think I got detention from all my other teachers for asking why too. It's a phase I grow out of, they said. But here I am, several centuries in, still asking that same question. Sorry, I just have a lot of things I suddenly feel the need to pour out. Pour away, I said, as I did exactly that to my cereals. Talking of which, is that, human milk? There's a bit of a taboo over using Clandusprod milk in adulthood. No. Oh, that's good. I mean, I don't know why it would matter, but it's cow's milk. What? That's worse. Heard of cows? Yes, I've heard of cows. It was one of the books I've been reading. Books? Yes, I forgot to tell you. There's a whole library up here with all sorts of publications on all sorts of different planets and cultures. Fascinating. What planets did you read about? Oh, only yours so far. But I've read quite a bit about your species' history. I am so very, very sorry, and I can explain everything. Oh, don't worry. It's much like Clandusprod culture was when our species was your age, all raw noise and ego. Oh, and pirate ships. They were the best of all. And dinosaurs. They sound like fun pets. Oh, they would decidedly not be fun pets. Most of them, anyway. But they were before my time. A long, long way before my time. Before any humans were on Earth, in fact. Oh, Lizzie sounded disappointed. You really haven't been on your planet very long, have you? Compared to us, I mean. I wonder who put you there. We evolved from monkeys, so the story goes, but I wasn't there for that part either. Well, yes, but what gave you the evolutionary nudge, I mean? We evolved from roundelaws, but the story goes that they were put there by a spaceman who stood up on two legs. He sounded not unlike a human now that I think about it, but with antlers, a bit like your deer. I think you've been reading a bit too much, Lizzie. It's scrambled your brain. It's true. Well, mythology type true. People wrote it down assuming it was true, but for all we know, the people who came up with it before us were just joking. What was your life on Ziggurat's 3 like? Really like, I mean. Not like the version of Earth you're getting from books. For me, deadly boring. It was generally assumed that we had evolved to our fullest capacity, no more, no less, so there was no great ambition to discover new technologies the way they are on your planet. Well, you might have a point there. Every new invention seems to bring its own share of both peace and trouble, depending what sort of people are using it. It felt like, to stick 2 of these Earth chapters together, a punk trapped in a monastery. Everyone was so insistent that everything had been done, but nothing more could be learnt without it somehow dismantling civilization, so we didn't really go anywhere or do anything. We should have discovered the Earth long before you discovered us, for instance. So much older are we, but we didn't because it was considered unnecessary. We may have a point there too, you know. If we hadn't discovered you, we wouldn't be in the process of blowing you up right now. That's just a neighbourhood quarrel. If I've learnt anything from these books, then a missile being pointed at you is basically your way of saying hello. Go on, what else? Everything we learnt was what our parents knew before us, and grandparents before them. There were no great discoverers at all. Everyone ate the same thing they'd been eating for several generations. Everyone had the same conversations. Everyone thought the same thoughts. The silence was so monotonous I couldn't stand it, and you weren't allowed to question any of it. Every time I would ask why something was that way, I was told it just was. Every day when you wake up, you knew exactly what you would be doing, and you were expected to behave a certain way. Every time I had what I saw as a natural emotional response to something in my life, be it glorious shade of colour on a tree, or a book falling on my foot, or another Clandusprod really annoying me, everyone else would take it as an undisciplined devolutionary response of wild colour and raw noise. I didn't really fit in with a world that was mostly beige, beneath all the purple. So nobody ever broke those patterns, not even you. Well, sure, every so often there were always bands of outsiders, the odd brave soul who were courageous enough to speak out against conformity. They were my heroes and heroines, but never ever enough, and none of them ever seemed to last that long. If ever there was a change in direction, soon there would be movements to counter the movements, and the world just got further into one huge muddle. There was one thing my race wasn't built for. It's a huge muddle. Clandusprods tend to like being told what to do as a rule. And what could anybody really say when targets were being met, and profits were on the up, and most people had what they wanted, as they were sure to be every generation or so. They soon forgot how hard it had been in the times when they had nothing, and the people in charge were going back on their promises, and everything seemed so messy and unclear. As for me, it didn't help that I was also, well, scared to tell you the truth. After a while I stopped defying anyone openly, because it got me into so much trouble, and I didn't want to be in trouble because that just made me noticed. For a while that too became another form of rebellion. Clandusprods are meant to be so brave and bold and confident, and in all my time I never met another one quite like me, full of worries and doubts. But as I became more and more ostracised, I lost touch with who I was. I lost all faith in myself. When I ended it, it was because that still seemed easier somehow than facing yet more criticism, and attempts to curb who I really was. It seems silly, though, to say that I ended up here simply because I was afraid. Enwyn mentally put his arms around me and gave me the sweetest hug. Well, I'm glad you're you, he said. I'm not sure if I would have got on with a confident Clandusprod. And what's so great about confidence, anyway? In my experience, anyone who thinks they have all the answers, or who can control everything, is invariably proved wrong. I guess I just feel as if I failed as a Clandusprod. Maybe. I know I feel as if I failed as a human most of the time. I don't have a job, a steady income, or a family, or any of the things humans praise above all else. But I think I've done okay, as an Enwyn. And as far as I'm concerned, you've succeeded as a Lizzie. You may not have confidence, but to me that makes you the bravest Clandusprod of them all. Just look at what you've done since I met you. You could have hidden in your room and never come out. That's sweet, but not really. I was just doing as I was told, again. In truth, I was terrified of you waking up and ignoring me, or poking fun at me. It always seems to have got me into trouble in the past. It probably will again. Who knows? The universe is a very random place sometimes. You have to have a thick hide to survive it, whatever species you are, probably. Ha! I like that coming from a species with such thin skin and poor sunlight. Worryingly, that's how the next place seems too, at least the part I've seen so far. I really thought somebody out there would know something, or have a system. I'm beginning to think that they don't. Was heaven how you expected it? I guess not. I never really thought about it much. I mean, you don't really, do you? Yes, all the time. Why? Oh, well, when you spend this long, this close to it, you do begin to wonder what life was all about, and what happens next. And it impacts so much on your time here. I mean, if what we're doing here is a sort of school that's supposed to be teaching us something we can learn from, then every bad experience and mistake makes sense. But if we end up skipping ahead to seeing the answers in the next life, or even worse, finding out that there isn't a next life at all, then what was the whole point? I guess I'd rather be following a plan than a random act, even if I don't know what that plan is. For if it's all supposed to be random, then all our foundations we live by suddenly fold. We don't actually have to be nice to each other. We don't have to look out for each other. We can do what we like and not think about being punished for it. But if there is something else, and this question has fooled better people than me, then it might be all worth those struggles in the end. In which case all those attempts to fit in as Clandusprods and humans were only a mirage, and all we can be is the best version of ourselves. That's an interesting view. Surely it should be me saying that, being the one who passed over and ended up here and all that. For such a young species, Enwyn, you can be a very old soul sometimes. Enwyn laughed heartily at that. Well, that's what comes from being poorly and spending so much time in your own head. To be honest, I keep thinking I keep coming across the truth, but it's really just the lightest shade of the same shadow that blocks everything from sight. Maybe we are not meant to know, yet. I don't know. All I ever wanted was to be free, but I realised that I had just been locking myself up in bigger and grander boxes, having myself tagged as the outsider, the outcast, the troublemaker. From a time when it seemed as if nothing was working, the world switched back into thinking it had only the one choice, and that nothing else had any chance of working. I must confess it sounds bliss, Enwyn said. Well, parts of it anyway. It's the unpredictability of life here that gets me down. I have noticed that. When we went out for that walk, everything seemed so random. People, vehicles, flashing signs. There was no order, only chaos. It's a bit like that existentially too, at least in this century. Everyone is always jostling each other to make more money, to get ahead, to be the first to invent something new and have one over on your rivals. There are no safe jobs anymore, no stability. The planet, the one thing we always used to rely on, is beginning to run out on us, so we can't do what the generations before us did, or strive ahead in any meaningful way. Everyone feels divided, as if they're being taught to fight the people around them, purely to stop us all clubbing together to gang up on the real villains, the small few who are making money out of all of this. And while technology has made life cozier than mere survival, it's just given us another million new ways to kill ourselves. It really is a very unsettled time. But then, I suppose looking back through history, there never really was a time, certainly not a life-spanning time, when the earth ever did feel settled. That sounds, well, exciting at least. More so than on Ziggurat 3. I guess it is, but I wish, just for a week or two at least, we could all take a break from it and get our breath back. I don't know if it's my illness isolating me from the world, but so much of what goes on just feels so unnecessary. Activity that just doesn't seem to get anybody anywhere. There's no equilibrium anymore, and having a good day today doesn't mean it can't all be taken away from you tomorrow. Going back to what you said about a monastery, most days I feel like a hermit philosopher who's just stumbled out of my cave to tell the world the meaning of life. But everybody else is just loudly clanking their way through the material world in too much of a rush to listen. In other words, I'm too noisy for my planet, and you're too quiet for yours. But together, we are just right. Perfect. What a lovely couple we make, eh? No wonder you're trying to blow us up with so many differences. I know how much humans like to dominate and compete with each other, and now you have a whole new species to submit to your whims. I meant it as a joke, but Enwin pulled a face at that. I got caught up into that way of thinking too sometimes, back when I was part of the system, and having to fight my own path through it. But being ill and being apart from people, it automatically makes you an outsider that can't fit into what they want you to do, or who they want you to be. You can't be efficient or maximise anything when you feel like this. So you start seeing everything anew without the social conditioning they've been feeding you since birth. The irony is that even though it is you that is sick, you see all these people who think they are well, but are actually ill, because they haven't learned to see any differently, and that their minds have been tampered with. It's up to those of us who are ill to make a stand and speak out, otherwise nobody is there to see past the conditioning. I hated all the virtues my planet tried to make me live up to. They were all so wrong. I felt I could have been good at so many things, but because they weren't what my planet considered useful, there I was on the scrap heap. I would come up with some individual concept, some new idea that I thought help make the world a better or fairer place, but as they could never be cost effective, down they went, and me with them. Now with Clandusprods replacing us as Earth's bogeymen, who knows what they will do to bring out the worst in humanity. Really, our planets have a lot more in common than you think. Both of our powers that be are afraid of losing control, and of anyone thinking differently to them. We are truly two sides of the same coin. Why me then? Why was I put there to help you? I had been thinking all this time that I was meant to be with you to teach you to think differently, that if we're really the same deep down, then I'm not sure there's any point to us being here, but we still want to be, of course. I think you were put here to help me because you see things the rest of your kind don't see. How do you know? Because I see them too, Lizzie. Just then we were interrupted by another news report discussing a new tax that was coming into effect to help pay for the new missiles that were apparently being assembled in record time, in tandem with cuts to benefits and pensions. Enwin groaned. Well, there goes a few extra pounds of that poor chap still living on the corner, for me and everyone in the town, I should imagine. What a stupid state of affairs. I'm sorry, Lizzie. You really aren't seeing humans at their best in this period. I started a thought about whether humans had ever had a best period, given all that I had read in the books, but stopped it just short of finalising it, as I didn't want to upset Enwin. Instead I asked, well then, I think it's about time you showed me something good about your species. Enwin grinned at this. I moved silently to a cupboard. I have never seen him open before. This, he said with pride, this is the best humanity has ever had to offer, I think. Beacons of light in the darkness. With that he pulled out multiple books and several discs of different sizes, which he told me were all CDs and DVDs, though the terms meant nothing to me. Books though I recognised. I had after all come from a clan of education. Well, I guess it's an education of a sort, but perhaps not the way you think, Enwin said, and I jumped again at the fact that he was answering my subconscious thoughts as well as my conscious messages to him. They all have one thing in common, though they do it in very different ways. They help to make you feel less crazy and less alone when the world makes you think just that. I can't tell you how many times these seemingly inanimate objects have saved me and brought me joy and hope and humanity. With that he stuck one of the discs into a player and opened up a book so that I could read it, telling me that he would come to the DVDs later. The first thing he played me was a Beach Boys album named Smile. Ironically, such an earth word that, with no Clandusprodic equivalent, it made me cry. So much emotion, so much hope, so much brilliance. The book, which Amy was shocked to find I could skim read at speed, one of the perks of being a Clandusprod librarian, was the diary of a young girl persecuted by another country who kept her faith not so much in the religion she was persecuted for as in the goodness of humanity. This too made me cry, especially the sad ending. What a race this was, all mixed up, where right and wrong lived side by side and the wrong people kept winning. I got an entirely different idea of humanity than I got from what I now recognise were dry and slightly muddled textbooks on Earth from up in heaven. This was a planet where, unlike ours, where everything, even greediness, was kept in sections, good and bad, lived side by side, the cruelty and pain that one human could inflict somehow turned into something beautiful and uplifting. Then we put a second disc on, and to my shock I recognised the names on the back sleeve: Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, Starkey. We have those too. They were a group of Clandusprod philosophers in our 4,714th week of existence, which was, well, ever such a long time ago. They brought in the age of enlightenment and reason, helped take us out of the dark ages when we were more like you, competitive and opulent. One of them married a Clandusprod named Yoko and started a whole culture of peace and bed in protest that changed a lot for our planet. One of them made the most brilliant music in every genre possible. One of them brought spirituality back to our planet with her mystical teachings. The fourth taught our children stories involving personalised galumphary machines. Together as a group, they showed us freedom and equality. I guess it must be one of those fixed points of time the balls of lights were talking about, crucial to the development of every species. Wow, I guess every planet has its own Beatles. That somehow makes a lot of sense. Beetles, is that the name they used? They were the beadly glards on my planet, but I'm guessing that's a word that doesn't translate too well. I see they have interesting haircuts in your world. They were bald on mine. Same kind eyes though, even the outspoken Lennon one. No, that beadly glard doesn't mean anything to me. The name they used here was a pun on beat music and insects. Okay. Our way it's a pun on being a member of every Clandusprod clan at once, equally. That somehow sounds very Beatles too. I wonder if your planet has the Spice Girls. Try this. Only lasted a few seconds. Turn it off, Edwin, it's horrible. I guess not, he laughed, sticking the Beatles back on. I guess that's kind of a relief. I'm not sure I'd want to be part of a universe with the multiple Spice Girls. I showed Lizzie the DVDs next. I tried E.T. Lizzie didn't seem to find it funny, though I did, being more impressed at the fact that humans had again created something artificial, involving light sources in a completely different method and context of a light bulb. Is that what humans think aliens look like? Not really. This is one of the cuddly ones. Most aliens are big and scary in human fiction. I'm glad you're not. Enwyn, I might be many things, but I am not big and scary. Well, I suppose to you I might seem big. Tell the truth, I'm quite small for my species and age, have a bit of a persecution complex about it, and I'm definitely not scary. No, you're sweet. I guess E.T. is the only real alien we have in our culture that's sweet. Well, the clangers, I guess, but they seem to spend most of their time making soup. You do know all this is gibberish to me, right? What is he doing now? Phoning home? Without a teleportal? Silly alien. His phone bill will be astronomical. Hang on, why are you on the ground laughing? I explained that she had inadvertently made a pun that was funnier than anything I had in any joke book. Inevitably, that resulted in me getting out the old joke book I still owned. Doctor, I feel like a pair of curtains. Pull yourself together. This is funny. Well, admittedly, some of them are kind of poor. I think you might need a few more human references to get the most out of these jokes. I know you understand humour, though. I've heard you laugh. Usually when you're not meant to. Is this about the first time I saw the human body nude? That was hysterical. Yes, there is a time and a place, you know, Lizzie. Lizzie then exploded. She was reading the writer's biography on the back. I don't think it was actually meant to be funny, but it would be rude to point that out. I think I like funny. We should make our own joke book one day. Is that a normal thing to do on a date on Earth? Never one that I've had, but maybe we can start a new tradition. We spent the rest of the night spinning records, reading books, watching programmes, talking philosophy and cracking jokes. It was a perfect night, One of those golden ones where the universe finally gives you everything you have ever been dreaming of unexpectedly, in one neat bow, infused with the undeniable sense of dread that at some point this moment of perfection will have to end, and that nothing will ever be the same again. I first felt the tingle of that when Lizzie asked me about the other inhabitants of the earth. You know, I've been studying your news for years now, very nearly a week, and I've never seen one mention of what's happening on this side of the world. No, well, that's because they're poor and considered less newsworthy. People only tend to care about what's happening near to them. What a narrow view of things to take. So if nothing newsworthy to say to you mean? That's crazy. I'm sure it's newsworthy to them. How does it work on your planet then? Once a year, I guess a week or so your time, all the clans of a Clandusprod gather together to discuss what they need from the other. Information and books about some maintenance subject, or a funny story for the nursery, or a leaking pipe getting in the way of a political debate, or extra food rations of a sick bay, something like that. Anybody who needs anything can generally get it without too much hassle, because it's only going to backfire on you the next time you need something from someone else. We swap our news stories then. Our planet is not very big after all, so we have less need for international news channels than you. Most of the time though, our clans go our separate ways then, and live their own lives. That sounds like a really good system. Well, there's none of the outward signs of hardship that you have. With people living in the street, the closed jobs, the increased taxes, none of that would be allowed to happen. But somehow, hidden inside all that, it's hard to explain, but at least you have a certain amount of freedom here. You can choose what to do if something is available. Our lives are more regimented. If you have a problem with something, it's not as if you can protest it, or that anybody will ever listen. That's just how it always was, and always seemingly how it is meant to be. I was never really allowed to make my own decisions, because they always had to go through a committee of Clandusprods who would invariably disagree with me. Also, a century is a long time to be told you're not old enough to do something. You also know what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, and Clandusprods live a long time. Somebody must have more power than the others. Who's in charge of you all? My brain is pulling on me to say democracy is in charge. I'm not sure if that's just a faulty translation. Basically, nobody is. You mentioned politics before. Do you have someone voted in to take charge? Any police or army? No, that would be silly. There is a clan of political Clandusprods, but there are so many of them they spend most of their lives in training for their one big moment, and then it's over in 6 years. Oh, that's not too bad. Sorry, I meant 6 weeks your time. Earth time is still a bit of a problem. 6 weeks? Yes, that way everyone is encouraged to act for the greater good. There's no point making promises you can't keep because you'll be out of a job before you can make them, and mentoring the next Clandusprods down the line to take over from you. About 6 weeks where everyone is at your beck and call, and you can rely on anyone's services. Everyone works for the greater good. It feels on your planet as if everyone is working for the greater harm. Well, I'm sure some of them are, but no, mostly they're just working to get into power so they can either make money off being in charge or setting up money they make when they retire. It's not so much that it's for greater harm, so much that it's for greater benefit to them, and it doesn't matter if what you want doesn't fit that. That sounds so perfectly alien. Oddly, it does to me too, and I live here. Lizzie, did you ever get an instruction book on how to live in your society? No, I could have done with one of those. Same here. Maybe no one has worked out how to live life properly yet. Maybe we should write it. Ha, what do we know? A lone Clandusprod and a human. Going back to the being in charge thing, did you ever have a religion on your planet? Religion? That's an interesting word. I'm just going to turn it round in my head to get a meaning. No, more a spirituality, I think, is the word calling to me. No gods or disciples or religious text. Nothing like that. You didn't have an idea of the afterlife before you got here. Oh, we had that. Or how else would we have had ghosts, silly? Ghosts? Oh yes, the dead often come back to say hi. Don't they on your planet? Well, some people say they do. Maybe there aren't as many of your people up there yet to come down to visit. Death is still quite rare at home. We are quite a long-established race. Those who have departed before us, their remains are always with us. in a crate in the wall with a plaque. You're always a part of a clan, even after death. Though I'm not sure, given the circumstances, that I ever will be. Lizzie seemed sad at this, so I gave her another mental hug. We just put ours in the ground. Isn't that the wrong end? I mean, aren't you trying to get up above, to where I am now? I suppose so. I never really thought about it that way. A sudden coughing spell overtook me, while Lizzie looked concerned. Memories of our conversation with the other voices the previous night about age expectancy playing out in her brain. Are you awfully sick, Enwyn? I wonder whether to lie, and figure she'll only hear it if I do. Yes, I say straightforwardly, and the easy-flowing laughter between us stops for a moment. I fear I am very ill, and might be joining you in your teleportal booth sooner than you think, if it works like that. I don't know how it works. It'd be wonderful to have you here, but don't make the mistake I did and give in to it. I only realise now, since ending up here, that I should have made more of my life, and yet been patient about when to make it too, for I might be up here for an eternity, and that's an awfully long time. So your time might be too long, and mine too short. How very us. Is there nothing anyone can do? I fear not. All I know is that I have been carrying this illness around with me to the point where there is more illness in me in here now. I think you know when your time is growing short, or at least I do. I thought at first when I heard your voice that you were an angel to take me away in my sleep. To be honest, that's the real reason why I wasn't scared of you, not what I said to the others. I half expected you, you see. Lizzie snorts. Some angel. I can't even save myself, never mind you. Well, I had a feeling mine wasn't going to be a straightforward angel somehow. Whatever you are, I am so glad you are here. It feels like you are a gift from the universe to brighten up my last days on Earth, complete with a promise of what might be to come. You too. Thank you for sharing this. Well, not the Spice Girls CD, that was horrible, but everything else. I feel oddly less alone now, even though everything I have read and heard were made for the eyes and ears of an entirely different species. You know the odd thing, I don't think any of the people who made those great works of art would mind. They were visionaries who truly represent the best of mankind, I think. Our capacity to offer love and support, and hope. It is they who should have been your world leaders. They would have been on my planet. And that, dear Lizzie, is why yours is seen as being more civilized than ours. With that we snuggled up together, closing our eyes to better feel that we were in each other's arms. Finally, I thought, I no longer have to feel scared or anxious or hide who I truly am. At last I can live out a full and contented life through the eyes of another person and forget about my own. We were so lulled into our sense of security that we barely noticed another news alert on Enwyn's television. They now had a deadline for the missile's launch day, and even accounting for Earth timings, it didn't seem to be very far away. It's odd how, even in a timeless universe, you get the sense of being late. I'd been talking to Enwyn for most of the night, until he was not merely half asleep, but a good 3/4. As a being without a body, I didn't need sleep in the same way, but after all that talking I certainly needed a rest, and my body was getting quite hunched over after sitting on that chair. I got up stiffly, and prepared to stagger back into my room, but as I went I heard a lot of mutterings, and paused just behind the doorway, so I can better listen.
Why is there a light on that teleportal? It's meant to be out of bounds.
A voice I didn't know was asking. One of the rogue beings from the third dimension was using it. Poor thing, she was tested far too much and ended up here, instead of there where she was meant to be doing important work for us. But not in there, surely. Well, yes, why ever not? Because that's the wrong planet. We've only just discovered them for ourselves. They're such a new civilization compared to the others, and they've evolved in such a chaotic way. And they vary so much as individuals, so much so that you never know if you are going to get peace or war. Usually the planets we discover have such a set way of thinking, that all the inhabitants have it. But the beings on this planet are so new that they are still cooking, and haven't quite coalesced yet. You mean they're dangerous? They could be. Best to leave them alone for now then. We'll have to reappoint the being, of course. They've only had a few sessions, I think, so no harm done. Of course, we clearly got the wrong being to connect her to by some accident. We'll put her with the one she was meant to be, to change the world with when she comes round. I doubt they found anything in common to talk about anyway. I wait for them to leave, and then tread back to my room thoughtfully. The voice who would show me to the teleportal did seem a bit clueless as to what was going on. I'm sure it will all be nothing, but a part of me still worries. No, they couldn't take my Enwyn away from me, not so soon. And what did they mean? Of course we were going to change the world. That had been hovering in my mind, and I suspect in his ever since our first meeting. But we were meant to do this, together. The discovery of each other's worlds had clinched it for me. The voices had plainly made another mistake for all their assumed superiority, and it would all be put right in the morning. Or the next world equivalent of the morning anyway. For all my confidence though, there were uneasy thoughts that ran through my head as I thought everything over. Was I meant to be with Enwyn after all? Did I believe in fate? I had got it wrong the last time I had taken my life into my hands after all. But surely my heart couldn't be wrong, could it? Surely we were meant to be together, whatever the voices said. Or maybe that voice wasn't referring to us at all. I somehow found myself back in my room, without consciously looking for it, as these thoughts ran through my head, and found myself even more subconsciously falling to sleep exhausted, even though there was no need for me to sleep. Even in this state though, my subconscious kept tugging away at me. Things seemed impossible when me and Enwyn were together. What could we possibly do to make things better when we were apart?